Hello, Paul. Thank you so much for joining the Spotlight on Internal Communication series that I run with thought leaders. So I've been trying to understand various aspects and nuances of internal communications from the perspectives of leaders who've been there and done it. And very excited to have you on the show to talk about public speaking and business communications, area which you are expert on. So before we get started, Paul, it'll be great if you could quickly introduce yourself for our viewers.
Yeah, I'm Paul Barton. I'm the principal consultant of Phoenix Public Speaking, and I've been in business communications for, almost 3 decades now. And I'm really excited to be here tonight because I love talking about this stuff. So
Fantastic. Thank you so much, Paul. So let's get started. So just wanted to understand from you, this is a topic which is expected to be understood and imbibed by organizations, but it's not always so. So what is the value and importance of public speaking and business communications in organizations?
yeah, I think it's just an absolute critical skill. I think public speaking in the environment we find ourselves now that's so highly competitive that I really see it as a business survival skill to be able to speak well and to be able to express your ideas. You've got to be able to tell your story.
Right. And so, why is it so important, and how, for leaders, especially for managers, for communicators, so why is it so important?
Well, communication and leadership are really kind of one of the same thing. And
Right.
if you kind of expand it, when you look at business communications, it's essentially is how you get a job in the first place. Being a good public speaker helps you through the interview process. It's probably how you're going to get promoted or whether you're going to stay in one spot. The people that you see get promoted ideally are really good at their jobs and they can talk about them. But we all have probably seen people in our careers who can talk a good game and maybe aren't as good, but they're the ones that get ahead. So it's really a skill that you need to develop.
Fantastic. And so what according to you are some of the ways in which, leaders can get better at communicating, business communication as well as speaking?
Yeah. Well, there's coaches like me out there that can help you out. And you think about it, even professionals, when you look at, athletics or something, have coaches.
Right.
Not everybody took a public speaking class in college, or if they did, it might not have been focused on business
Right.
communication because speaking from a podium is a lot different than speaking in a boardroom, right? Without a microphone or without a script or prepared notes and
Right.
so forth. But I would also suggest that people just kind of get feedback and find out what it is that is motivating people and what is connecting with them when they talk. And I think they'll find out that storytelling and their ability to communicate and express themselves can really help them out as a leader.
Brilliant. And and that, I mean, that's interesting because the next question is very much linked to what you just said. So what advice do you have for communicators? Because a lot of communicators need to coach their leaders in terms of how they should communicate. And often leaders are resistant to getting feedback because they feel that they have already reached a level where they are leaders and therefore they should know how to communicate effectively. So how do you advise communicators go about this?
Well, I think for quite a while now, communicators, internal communication folks have recognized that face-to-face communication is a really powerful way to communicate. But we've relegated ourselves to supporting that through tools by developing talking points or frequently asked questions or even PowerPoints and so forth. And I think most internal communication folks come up through the writing ranks. We probably used to write, if we're old enough, we used to write print publications, and then we started writing the web, and we see our skill strictly as writing. But as the world's evolving, video is becoming such a huge way to communicate now that the spoken word is got to be a skill that communicators need to develop. So if you don't already have that skill as a communication professional, I really think it's one that you're going to need to have going forward.
Great, absolutely. And related to what you're saying, there are personalities which also come in the way in which leaders and communicators communicate. So, for example, there are introverts, there are extroverts, there are people who are in between that spectrum. And most of the time, if you're an introvert, then your preference is for email and stuff which is not really face to face and engaging. So, how do you kind of manage this delicate balance?
Yeah, it's tough for some folks. They envision, they have kind of a picture of what public speaking means, and it's usually not what it really is or what's effective. They kind of picture it as the traditional guy at the podium giving a speech, and that makes them nervous, right? But what they really need to do is just talk, and what they really need to talk about are stories. Storytelling is just really powerful, and the good news with that is you don't need a script for that. They're your stories. So
Right.
I've found that to be an effective way to engage managers. Give them an idea of, if they've been in their career for a while, they probably have some passion around that career. And usually with passion, a story or two will come out and they'll see how effective that is.
Got it. And now, because of the pandemic, the world has shifted to digital, and most of the meetings are online. So in this kind of an online environment, it's obviously much harder to be communicating, and also in terms of speaking. So what's your advice on how people can go about that?
Well, it's absolutely even harder to engage people now than it was before, right, in a virtual environment. So I've kind of broken it down, and there's really like 3 areas that you can control. There's your environment, there's the technology, and then there's your own presentation skills. So the environment's things like having a quiet room, having it well lit so people can see you and not like backlit, or having a ceiling fan coming out of your head, right? Then there's the technology side. You really need to understand the technology that you have, all the tools that you have available to you. And some of that's for engagement. Do you have polling available? How do you use the chat box, right? All of those things that can help engage an audience. And then lastly is your self-presenting. And there's some clear differences between presenting online than presenting before a live audience. One of the biggest things I find is eye contact. And we need that in both environments to be able to connect with people. The problem with it online is that sometimes we're looking at a picture of somebody on the screen and we're looking at their eyes, but that's not where the camera is. So we're not making eye contact. So you got to learn to look right at that camera and not necessarily over where they're appearing on the screen. So that's a huge thing. You also want to do things, sitting up straight and all that good stuff with posture, because we're not standing most of the time. We're sitting now when we present. And then things in your presentation, sarcasm and dry humor does not translate well online. So really kind of an upbeat presentation, really energetic, carries the day.
That's fantastic tips, Paul. And so as we wrap up, I wanted to ask you, if what is your understanding? And is there a way of measuring the effectiveness of business communications and public speaking? Because it sounds very intangible. You can see someone on a podium or you see someone on camera, but how do you know whether they are really effective?
Yeah, well, like all communication measurement, it seems to be tough, right? But it can always be done if you dig deep enough. And I think you'll find, if you look at change management projects, things where you're trying to change employees' behavior, at the end of the day, if you ran a focus group or any kind of a survey, or even just your gut reaction, you'll usually figure out that those really tough behavior changes come not from something in writing, but from something that a leader said to their employees to get them motivated. So we really kind of go through a communication model that Aristotle and the ancient Greeks came up with years ago, and it really hasn't changed that much. But I break it down to, in your eyes, awareness, in your head, understanding, and then in your heart. And that's when you actually make the behavior change. And you'll find out that there's certain tools that match up with those steps. So print and written word are pretty good about awareness and getting you to think about things, but to really get in the heart requires that spoken word, because it gets at the emotion and the passion, and that's where the behavior change happens. So it's just a critical piece to the puzzle that communicators need to master.
Brilliant. Thank you so much, Paul. I think these are fantastic insights, and I'm sure our viewers will really appreciate what you've shared. Thank you so much for taking the time to do this.
Excellent. Well, thank you. This has been fun.